Now, the rest of the story. Art Simmons was the neighborhood bully. But there was one thing that separated Art from the neighborhood bully you probably know. Art could fight. He could fight. While other bullies were mostly bluff and bluster, this one could underscore his intimidation with a remarkable pair of fists. Though he was barely 14, it was said that a full-grown man would think twice before taking on Art Simmons. Unfortunately, Art did not bully full-grown men. In fact, he often picked on younger boys, in particular a neighbor boy named Mike. Mike's father hated fighting, was always telling his son to avoid a confrontation. The Simmons boy calls you a name Dad admonished, you just ignore him. But Mike's father had forgotten how a boy's honor needs defending, and so he was shocked the afternoon he looked out the window and saw a battle raging right in front of their house. And it was Mike and Art Simmons. Furious, Dad rushed out the door and stopped it. You both ought to be ashamed, he was starting to say, when suddenly from somewhere, Mike's brother John came running full speed and tackled the Simmons boy. Well, now Dad had had enough. He seized John by the collar and hauled him into the house and gave him a whipping. John protested. After all, he was only trying to defend his younger brother. But Dad was adamant fighting was wrong, and that would have been that, except for the rest of the story. 3 days passed before John and Art Simmons encountered each other again. There were the usual taunts from the latter. John said, all right, if Art wanted a fight, he'd have a fight, but this time not where some grown-up could intervene. Instead, out in the woods, where a winner and a loser could be determined once and for all. So John and Art met in the woods. The boys were the same age, apparently evenly matched, fighting for their own territorial supremacy. John for his kid brother, and for all the kid brothers in the neighborhood. And John did not let them down. It was a merciless thrashing that he gave Art Simmons. And yet, unlike most kid wars, this one accomplished something. First, the reformation of a bully. And next, the initiation of a lifelong friendship between the two contestants. And perhaps most significant, it revealed something in John he might not otherwise have recognized, maybe ever. A tremendous talent for doing battle with his hands, with his fists. Oh, there'd be other fights in John's life, some of them ranked among the most ferocious ever fought anywhere. But now, reflecting on them, you will always recall John's first fight. Fought for the love of Mike. Fought for the love of his brother Mike. The war in the woods near Boston that set two young feet on a path to immortality 100 years ago. For all your life, you've known the name of America's bare-knuckle boxing champion of champions, John L. Sullivan. Only now you know the rest of the story.
And now, the rest of the story. Bare-knuckle boxing is a sport that I'm glad was not popular when I was in high school. If bare-knuckle boxing had been popular, I know there would have been a whole slew of impromptu boxing matches in school, and I probably wouldn't have fared very well. Bare-knuckle boxing originated in England. The earliest recorded match which could be considered bare-knuckle boxing happened in January 1681, when Christopher Monk, that's the second Duke of Albemarle, arranged the first boxing match in England between his butler and his butcher. Now, the only detail we know about the match is that the butcher won the fight. The first bare-knuckle champion was James Figg, who claimed the title in 1719. In that same year, James opened a fighting amphitheater in London which seated more than 1,000 spectators. Also in 1719, he set up a pugilistic foundation and taught other boxers the science of clinch hands, when and how to clinch your fist during fights, as well as fighting with swords and quarterstaff. For more than 10 years, James fought and retained his championship title, well, until he retired in 1730. Now, I need to clarify the fact that boxing and bare-knuckle boxing are two separate things altogether because they follow different sets of rules. Initially, bare-knuckle boxing had no official recorded rules. But in 1743, the Broughton rules, created by champion Jack Broughton, were adopted to decrease the severity of injuries and the number of deaths. Under Broughton's rules, a round continued until a man went down. After 30 seconds, he had to face his opponent, had to square off, standing no more than a yard away, or be declared beaten. Hitting a downed opponent, as well as grabs and throws below the waist, were also forbidden. To further reduce the number of injuries and deaths, the British Pugilist Protective Association adopted a new set of rules in 1838 called the London Prize Ring Rules. The new rules provided for a 24-foot square ring bounded by 2 ropes, much as you would see in a boxing ring today. When a fighter went down, the round ended and he was helped to his corner. The next round would begin 30 seconds later, and each boxer was required to reach, unaided, a mark in the center of the ring. If a fighter could not reach that mark by the end of 8 additional seconds, he was declared the loser. Kicking, gouging, butting with the head, biting, and low blows were all declared fouls. The longest recorded bare-knuckle bout in history was between James Kelly and Jonathan Smith in Australia in December 1855. That fight lasted 6 hours and 15 minutes. 3 years after that longest bare-knuckle bout, in October 1858, John Lawrence Sullivan, John L. Sullivan, was born in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. John attended the Dwight Grammar School in Boston, where he performed well. John's parents, Michael and Catherine Sullivan, immigrants from Ireland, hoped that John would become a Catholic priest. In about 1875, John enrolled at Boston College. After a few months, John decided he preferred playing baseball to the priesthood. John said, "I threw my books aside and gave myself up to it. This is how I got into the baseball profession, and I left school for good and all. From the baseball business, I drifted into boxing." Now, I also must point out that bare-knuckle boxing was not legal under any federal or state laws in the United States. Authorities in some states arrested participants in bare-knuckle boxing bouts, while others just looked the other way. The first state in the Union to legalize bare-knuckle boxing was Wyoming in 2018. 2018. Wow. In December 1880, 22-year-old John traveled from Boston to Cincinnati, Ohio. At the time, newspapers referred to him as the Boston Giant and claimed he was the greatest living pugilist, or boxer. His modest and unassuming manner quickly gained him friends, but he was there to make a challenge. In a letter to the editor, John said, "I will be prepared tomorrow night at Robinson's Opera House to make a match to fight any man breathing for the championship of the world for any sum from $1,000 to $10,000 a side. This challenge is especially directed to Paddy Ryan and will remain open for 1 month." Now, Paddy Ryan, nicknamed the Troy Giant, was also an Irish-American boxer who became the bare-knuckle American heavyweight champion on June 1st, 1880. And this was done after 87 rounds in the ring, which lasted 1 hour, 28 minutes. Paddy defeated Joe Goss and won the title along with $2,000. Adjusted for inflation, that would be about $63,525 in today's money. You can see why it was very tempting. Remember, these fights were not held in fancy arenas, but in open fields, on dirt. This fight was held in a ravine near Collier's, West Virginia. By January of 1881, newspapers were already naming John the coming heavyweight champion of the world. Well, John and Paddy eventually met in a ring set up in front of the Barnes Hotel in Mississippi City, Mississippi, on February 7th, 1882. They had originally planned to box in New Orleans, but Louisiana Governor Samuel D. McHenry declared the fight illegal in order that all participants be arrested if the fight went forward. Well, John and Patty put up $2,500 each on the fight, and backers added $1,000 to each side. About 2,000 people gathered to watch the much anticipated match. After 8 rounds of boxing, which lasted a total of 30 minutes, John L. Sullivan earned the heavyweight champion title. John continued to win matches and held on to the title. Then came the Kilrain fight, a match between John L. Sullivan and Jake Kilrain. The fight was originally planned to take place in New Orleans until Louisiana governor forbid the fight to happen in his state. Promoters came up with a new location for the fight, but they kept it secret. The $20,000 pot and the Diamond World Championship belt, added with the secrecy surrounding the location of the upcoming fight, made it the most talked about sporting event in America. People who had no interest in the sport were drawn in by it. On the morning of July 8, 1889, around 3,000 people boarded special trains for the secret location. Those trains stopped at Richburg, a town just south of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. The fight began at 10:30 that morning, and it looked as if Kilrain would win. Kilrain landed several blows and drew first blood, but he failed to knock John down. The fight dragged on and on, punch after miserable punch. During the 44th round, John vomited. At first it looked as if the fight was over, but John was able to turn things around. In the 75th round, after fighting for 2 hours and 16 minutes, John gave Kilrain such a beating that Kilrain's manager threw in the towel to save his life in what turned out to be the last world title bout fought under the London prize ring rules. The governor of Mississippi offered rewards for both bare-knuckle boxers, and they both served jail time and paid fines for participating in that prize fight. Today, a historical marker is located at the site of the fight, and the fight is immortalized by the Sullivan-Kilrain Road, which runs through the site of the event at the corner of Richburg Road. Now, people say that if you visit there long enough on a hot July day, you can still hear the roar of the crowd. You can hear the sound of those punches landing over and over. Or maybe it's just the heat getting to you. I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching. And now you know the rest of the story.